Hi folks, Kim Schofield here with another video on my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be sharing a project featuring products from Joggles, some Flora and Frond stencils. You can see the canvas here. So we're going to be moving quickly because this was about a 40-minute video that I had to cut down. So some of this is going to go fast. I am starting out by showing you here the stencils I'm going to be using. I'm using a Dick Blick canvas board. So this is already covered with gesso. It's a thin board, awesome for doing projects. And I'm also going to be using some Dino Wakley paint and some gesso. That's just about it, and some glazing medium. So I wanted to show you here, when you get these stencils, the mask is attached, and it's attached by a small little piece of plastic. And you'll need to snip those little pieces to get all of the mask separated from the stencil part. So love these because you get a stencil and a mask in one. These are 6x9, so they're a great size for using in art journals or on a canvas. My canvas board is 8x10. I may have mentioned that already. And these fit perfectly. So here is the most fun about this project for me. This went in a completely different direction than what I had originally thought I was going to make. I had a very specific image in mind of what I was going to be making, and I wanted these bits of color peeking through a very white background. Yeah, I didn't go that way at all. But I absolutely love the way it turned out. So you just never know. This is a project to encourage you to keep going when you think, yeah, no, this is terrible. It isn't. Just add another layer of paint. So you can see here my very technical method of adding paint. Not really. Um, just using 3 colors, putting a bunch of color on the background. And really my plan was just have a little bit of these colors peeking through. So you can kind of see I got a hot mess there. Cleaning up my Play-Doh and make sure everything's dry. And I am using a heavy gesso. This is from Prima. And I'm using a heavy gesso because I've got some dark colors here and I want to cover that up. What you're going to find, or what I found, is that a lot of layers of gesso, and I was still trying to cover that up. So I kind of went over it, and then just showing you here that you can use a baby wipe to remove some of that color, because I felt like I wanted some of those colors poking through. I really love that cheddar color, which is that Dino Wakley paint. Ooh, that's a favorite of mine. I love it. So now all I'm really trying to do is add more gesso to cover up the space between the blocks of color that I have. So you don't see that separation quite as much. And so that's all I'm doing, is just adding more gesso, really trying to get to that point that, what I had in my mind was working out on the canvas, and it just never really went there, which happens sometimes. But that's one of the things I absolutely love about mixed media and working with paint is, gesso is your best friend. If you don't like it, just cover it all up again. And I almost thought about doing that at one point in this project. I'm just going to cover the whole thing up. But I came up with another solution, and it worked great. And so it's a glazing technique I'm going to show you, which is super easy. And I think hopefully you'll like the results as much as I did. So again, removing a little bit of that gesso, trying to get a little more color, trying to kind of get that, what I had in my head, working out. So I have another Joggle stencil here. This is a little bit larger stencil. I love this one. It has 3 different kind of just backgrounds. And I am just applying some Wendy Vecchi embossing paste, but you can use any kind of modeling paste. And you can see that I am removing some, and that's because sometimes when you have this rectangle or square area that you might have with a stencil, I didn't want something that looked like a rectangle or a square. I wanted it to be, old Venetian plaster wall kind of look. And so you can just go in with your palette knife and remove anything that you don't really like. So that is all dry. And now I'm playing with my the mask part, because I'm, just trying to see, how do I want these to lay out on the canvas? How do I, I'm going to layer them. So what do I want in the back? What do I want in the front? And using the mask part is great for being able to do that and kind of give yourself a visual. If you can't envision, I'm a pretty visual person. So that's what I did. So now I'm going to go and grab the stencil part, and I'm going to fill that in using more embossing paste. And again, you can use modeling paste here. So this did take me a couple of days to get all of the paste on because I had to let it dry before I would go on to the next layer. I did end up using the stencil. I moved it down a little bit and continued the branch part so that that would go all the way towards the end of the canvas. Okay, so here we have, you can see here, you see this little area? You can see the leaves in the background. I'm going to show you how I did that. I actually laid down the mask part, and I'll show you this here. So I'm laying the mask part over the dry embossing paste of that floral image. Then I'm going to take the leaf stencil and apply my paste over that. And so what that does is gives me a little bit extra dimension, and it also makes it look like one part of the floral image is in the front and then the other is in the back. You don't have to do this. You'll see with one of the other things that I did, the other layers, I just put it right on top. But this was kind of an interesting thing to try out. So I have all three of my designs down, and I added more gesso, can you tell? Because the background is really white now. So I did gesso over everything, including the embossing paste when it was dry, to tone down that background. And now I am adding paint, and I'm using my stencil as a mask to keep my paint from getting on the rest of the background. And I also used the mask part for the floral image. Then I put the stencil back over the dry embossing paste, and now I'm just using some paint to color in the areas there of my leaves, color my leaves. And I'm mixing a few colors in. This is I have a Dina Wakley paint here, and also one from Paper Artsy. And just kind of coloring these up, and I'll show you another little fun technique I came up with for adding shading as well. So now I can remove, you can see I removed both those spots, and now I only have the green where I want it, and in those other areas is where the flowers will be from the other stencil. It is kind of hard to tell because it's all white right now. But I did get a little spoogie of paint, makes me crazy. But I'll show you, I'm going to show you a great way to hide all that. So I ended up on these thin little stems using big brush markers to color these. You can see the brown there over on the left a little bit, and then I'm coloring the green here on the right. I just found that was the easiest thing to do. And the big brush markers are also awesome for adding shading. So you can see you just scribble that on, move it around with your finger, and that blends wonderfully right on top of that embossing paste. Really easy to do. I love big brush markers. They're so much fun. You can just do a lot with them. So now I'm going to put my stencil back over. Now with this floral image, this one I just laid over on top of that middle floral image, and that was fine. So you can do that too with layering as well. So either option works. So I'm just using some more of my Dina Wakley paint, a little bit smaller brush here, and painting all of these little flowers. So here everything is dry, and I use my big brush marker again to add shading. And now I'm using the mask to cover up the flowers I've already painted so that I can use the stencil to paint the flowers that aren't painted. Did that make sense? So it really, instead of having to cut out any kind of mask, you just use the one that's provided for you, and that covers up that area really well. So now everything is painted, and this is when I said to myself, this isn't really what I was going for. This wasn't what I liked. So here comes the fun part. I am going to do a glazing technique. So I have out some more of that cheddar paint, and I'm mixing about 50-50 of the cheddar paint and the glazing medium. And I've got a big brush. Don't panic now, because you're going to say, what is she doing? Really, it's good. I'm going to cover up the entire canvas with this cheddar paint. I love this cheddar. I've got to like paint a room with it or something. I love this color. It's awesome. So I'm going over everything. Now, when you use glazing medium It's going to extend the dry time on your acrylic paint, and it's also going to make your acrylic paint more transparent. And then you do get a teeny sheen with it when it's dry, but it's very, very subtle. So I've got that whole thing covered, and I'm going to let that dry for as long as it takes me, about a minute, but as long as it's going to take me to clean up my paint. So I'm going to clean up all that cheddar paint. I wasn't sure if I was done with that purple and red paint. So cleaning all of that up, just letting that stay on there. And now you need a lot of baby wipes. This technique requires many, many baby wipes. So my first pass with the baby wipe is really just to remove a lot of the paint. And then you can go back and start deciding, well, how much paint do I want to remove? And so anytime you want to take more of that glazing medium off, you can see on that left-hand side there, where I had a clean part of the baby wipe, it's going to take off a lot. If you let it dry longer, then you're not going to be able to remove as much. I tend to let it dry for about a minute or so, if that, 30 seconds to a minute. You can always add more if you want to. So if you find, yeah, it's wiping back too much, just go ahead and, keep some more of that mixture with your acrylic paint and put some more on. But I love the way that glazing medium and the paint adheres to anywhere there's texture, like around those little circles from that first stencil we used. Gorgeous. I love it. So now I'm going to glaze again. But this time I'm using an umber paint and a little bit not quite as heavy of a layer. And the reason I'm doing that is because I love things that look vintage. And this is Dina Wakley's umber. This is my favorite color to use in a brown. Oh man, gets in all the little nooks and crannies, and it just leaves that great, really antique vintage look. I absolutely love it. So you can see how sheer it is because I've got a lot of the glazing medium. So you can still see the color through, but what's going to happen is that umber is going to really cling on to certain parts of, you can see it there, certain parts of the canvas. See it right there up in the right-hand corner? That is fabulous. I mean, if you're into this kind of grungy stuff, it's really good. I love it. And so I'm just going to continue using my baby wipe, especially to get in all the little nooks and crannies there in between all the floral images. And by the way, perfect way to cover up any spoogey spots I had with paint around my stenciling. You can't even tell anywhere where that was left. But look at the way that just holds on to in between the circles and all that embossing paste. I was like, oh man, I love this now. I love it. This is, totally transformed from what I thought it was going to be. And I almost didn't do anything else to this except add a sentiment. So this is a 12 by 12 stencil from the Crafters Workshop, and I have some night paint. So this is from Dina Wakley. It's not a black. You think it would be, but it's not. It's a dark, 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 dark navy. Very dark navy. And I'd like to explain to you that the best way to put paint through a stencil using a sponge is to not use a lot of paint and to dab it off and, make sure your sponge doesn't have a lot of paint on it. And I still got a spoogey effect, which made me a little cranky on top of my nice canvas that I was very happy with. But I'll show you how to fix that. I was able to fix that as well. I almost tried to just wipe it all off, and I thought, no, that'll be a disaster with this dark navy paint. But I found a good solution that I think worked okay. So you'll see, it's just a little fuzzy around the U. Yeah, it made me a little cranky. So I went in with a white gel pen, and I basically just traced around the letters, and that was a perfect solution. It gave it a little bit of a highlight, had it pop off the background just a little bit, and covered up any areas that, were a little fuzzy. You could go in, I did take a very slightly damp brush and try to clean up the edges a little bit. And that is it for me today. Here's a close-up look at that nice glazing. Ooh, it's good. Thank you so much for joining me. Please visit the Joggles store for any of the products that I used. Here's my blog. Happy crafting.